All right, I think we're live. Hey, everybody, some gadget guy here. Quick little video. I woke up this morning. I was starting to get into all the April Fool's jokes that are going out there. It kind of sucks when you're in the United States and April Fool's jokes start going out for the rest of the world, and it's really only March 31st. But I'm drinking my coffee, I'm going through my Twitter feed, and I see from the Microsoft account that there's a new Surface available to pre-order. Well, isn't that very interesting? No, folks, I'm actually really excited about this. We have a new Surface, the Surface 3, not the Surface Pro 3, but the continuation of the consumer strategy started by the Surface RT and the Surface 2. Now, this is my Surface 2, and I loved the crap out of my Surface 2. Keyboard and kickstands, and I just thought it's a beautifully designed tablet, nice and injection molded magnesium shell. The only problem with the Surface was the fact that it was running the gimped build of Windows RT. I could still use it for a whole bunch of things like document editing and web browsing and playing the occasional round of Angry Birds. But a lot of the functionality that I come to enjoy from Windows products was sort of lost on that generation of products. Even my very well traveled Lumia 2520. This thing has been through a ton of different treks and traveling and stuff like that. So I really was hoping that we'd see some strategy by Microsoft to continue a consumer, an entry level, not entry level, but more consumer grade experience on top of what we get from the Surface Pro 3. So the Surface Pro 3 is designed to be a high end product that people can interact with, that can give MacBooks a run for their money. And I think it's also a smart strategy by Microsoft to position that the way it is, so that their manufacturing partners like Lenovo and Acer and Asus and Toshiba have sort of a goal and then room underneath to undercut. So the Surface Pro 3 is a premium product. It's expensive. And then they can build out products underneath that price point to make sure that they're still moving the ecosystem forward, but that Microsoft isn't hogging all of the spotlight, even though I think that the Surface Pro 3 is probably one of the most compelling Windows devices in the ecosystem right now, but I digress. So the Surface 3, actually, let me go into screen share so we can actually show the pre-order page. So the Surface 3, I think, is continuing a very similar strategy. The idea here is to not completely run away from companies like Lenovo that are already doing cool work with Windows 8, but to provide another benchmark, another tier that manufacturers can either aspire to meet or come in under. So it looks very much like a Surface Pro, but we're going to get into the hardware here in just a sec. So I really do like that you're not being punished. This is something that I'm getting a little frustrated with Apple recently, where if you can't spend enough money to showcase that you are buying the top tier product, people will know that you're not buying them. So like we're going to see a new iPhone 6C, and that's kind of punishing. Instead of being allowed to buy the previous year's high-end smartphone, you have to make do with the plastic phone, and everyone will know you couldn't afford the nice phone. And I kind of like that Microsoft's take on the Surface 3 isn't like, well, we're going to make this one out of plastic to make sure everyone knows that you can't afford a Surface Pro. It's, if you didn't know that this was a regular Surface 3 and not a Surface Pro, then people would probably just assume that you've got a Surface Pro 3. And I think that's kind of a cool way to kind of keep the visual aesthetics consistent. But as we scroll down, got all these go, Surface 3 is great for students and parents and mobile professionals. But here's where we get into the interesting stuff. So the screen size is going to be 10.8 inches, which is very similar to the slightly larger screen that we found on the Surface RT and Surface 2, because I think those are 10.7 or 10.8 inch screens also. We're going to have a 1920 by 1280 full HD plus. I hate how we have to come up with these names. Full HD plus LMNOP screens. But thankfully, they didn't gimp the resolution, the horizontal resolution. They just added to the vertical resolution so that we could have that same form factor that we find on the Surface Pro 3. It was a little dicey for me on the Surface Pro 3. I kind of wanted a full proper 2560 by 1600, and I like 16 by 9 screens, but seeing as how they didn't want to go 16 by 9, I was kind of bummed that they cut off the 2560. Here on the Surface 3, you can't really cut into 1920. The resolution gets too degraded when you do that, so thankfully they only added this to make it more of a 16 by 10, I guess, is the aspect ratio on that. 1920 by 1200 is proper 16 by 10. So this is almost not 16 by 10. I don't know what that is. I can't do the math in my head during a live broadcast. This is going to come in 64 and 128 gigabyte flavors, which also very exciting to see because, and I've got a couple examples here when I jump out of screen share. Windows tablets cut into storage way more than Android or iOS do. So if you start with a 32 gig tablet, you're really only looking at about 14 or 15 gig once you convert to binary, because this is decimal. This isn't binary calculation of storage. Once you format that storage, and then once you add for like a recovery partition and how large the Windows OS is. So the 64, for me, actually, if there's an option for a 64 gigabyte Windows tablet, that's really where the bare minimum should be. And this is something that I'm complaining about for the entire industry. This is not unique to Windows tablets, but I really wish we would stop reporting the total storage and start reporting how much is available to the end user when you first fire it up. But I digress. So the processor that we're going to see is this new Intel Atom X7, which I don't actually have any performance notes on. I've been rocking the older Intel Atoms in the different devices that I've been using right now, the 1.3 gigahertz Intel Atom processors. But I've already pulled this up. 1.37 pounds, not bad considering it's probably going to be made out of metal, just like the previous Surfaces have been made. 10.8 clear type full HD display plus aspect ratio 3:2. That's the aspect ratio, so it's not 16:10. The 10-point multi-touch. There is Surface Pen support. Again, very important considering that we're starting. I'm going to scroll up really quickly here. Considering we're starting this at the $499 price point, which is I'm assuming is for the 64 gigabyte version. And this is all that means it's already substantially more expensive than some of the Lenovo's that I've reviewed recently. The Acer Aspire, which I just posted a video on today. That's a much higher price point than what Acer is positioning a lot of their Windows 8 gear for. And then I was also really happy to see that we have RAM options as well. So already I'm thinking that stepping up to the 128 gigabyte version for the 4 gigabytes of RAM will be a huge step in the right direction for making this feel less like a netbook and a little bit more like a very powerful entry level laptop. I mean, we're totally blurring all of the lines between the different tiers of products. It's no longer just like consumer and pro. Now with all of the other Windows 8 tablets out there, we've got we've got dirt cheap tablets starting at $100, and now we've got consumer tablets ramping up probably into I would assume a $599 or a $699 price point to be landing the extra RAM and the extra built-in storage. But yeah, so there's this quad-core Intel Atom X7Z 8700 2 megabyte cache, 1.6 gigahertz with Intel Burst technology up to 2.4 gigahertz. Again, what makes the Intel Atom so exciting for tablets is you can play with apps just like you can on Android and iOS gear, or it also allows you to jump directly into full Windows programs. And I'll probably be throwing little annotations in this video for my reviews on the Lenovo Yoga, which uses the Intel Atom, and also the Acer Aspire Switch 10, because I'm doing full real audio recording and editing. I'm using programs like GIMP for proper Photoshop style editing. And it's a little slower than if I did it on a core processor, obviously, but I'm still able to do it, which isn't something I can always say about my experiences using Android or iOS. And we got a full-sized USB 3 port, a mini display port, micro SD card reader, micro USB charging port. Oh, that's super exciting, guys. No, I'm really stoked about this. One of the things that's kind of a bummer on my Surface is that the charge connector that I've got, the magnetic charge connector, is starting to wear. So if the cable is crimped at the wrong angle, it doesn't charge properly. And there is no other way to charge it. You have to use that funky cable. So that the fact that they're going to micro USB on this makes me so excited, because that means I can plug it into traditional batteries. I've got these huge RAV power batteries, and now I can charge a Surface on the go. I'm actually really stoked about this. We've got Windows 8.1, 1 year Office 365 with OneDrive cloud storage, a 3.5 megapixel front-facing camera, 8 megapixel rear-facing camera with autofocus. And for those front-facing cameras, if you catch my review of the Acer Aspire, the Acer shoots 1080p video, but it's not terrific. And I still have not found a tablet with a better front-facing camera than the ones found on the Lumia 2520 and on the Microsoft Surface 2. And what was funny is that the camera on the Microsoft Surface 2, the RT edition, was better than the camera on the Microsoft Surface Pro 2, especially for those of you wanting to cut a little video, sort of vlog or podcast or blogging style content. And we've got the rest of the, the best of a tablet. Let me see if this will We can rotate it really slowly because I'm not sure how well this is going to translate on a Google Hangout. But yeah, it looks very much like the continuation of the Surface line, that same 3x2 form factor. The Windows key sort of now indicating that the handheld orientation should be portrait, not landscape. When we start getting into this little Windows button right there, this little Windows key, that's sort of a clear indication that when you're holding it, you should hold it in portrait mode, and that's sort of another stab or competition against tablets like the iPad. Thankfully, it's not a 4:3 resolution, which I think 4:3 is horrible for when you're actually consuming content, because you get those huge letterboxes on anything that's widescreen. And I like to watch a lot of movies on my tablets. So that's always kind of a bummer. 3:2, you still get black bars. They're not quite as terrible as the black bars. And then also, thankfully, in Windows land, we have proper support for split screening apps. So you can always split screen it, do something else while you're watching a movie, throw up some Twitter. I tend to write an article, especially when I'm flying. I'll throw on a movie and do a little writing at the same time. Plus, we also get proper support for pen touch computing. There is, I don't think it's going to come with a stylus in the box like the Surface Pro does, but it'll support the stylus, which makes this, again, a very compelling offer, a very compelling option for someone looking at a well-built premium feeling experience, but they don't necessarily need all the horsepower of a proper core processor. So they don't need to step up to that pro computing, but this also means it'll be a fanless design, because those Intel Atom chipsets run a lot cooler than a Core. Even the Core M runs into a little bit of a thermal issue once you start cranking it up and you don't have any fans built into the casing. So I'm really stoked to see Microsoft pushing this forward. I'm actually kind of surprised that they announced this so quietly. We were just doing here. I'm going to get out of. Well, I'll leave this. Okay. Well, I'll jump out of screen share. I was actually really surprised that this was the. This was how they announced it. It was like a really quiet press release. This webpage went live, and then a couple people tweeted about it. And this is exactly what we were talking about on the weekly tech show that we do with Board at Work and BW1, where this was sort of rumored. We were expecting this to be coming out soon. We didn't know when it was actually going to drop, and now it's available for pre-order now. Really interesting strategy, really interesting move. And we didn't know, was it going to be using a low power Core M? Was it going to be using one of the more expensive Intel Atom processors? And now we've got all of the information on what Microsoft is going to be doing with the Surface. And I think it's an excellent strategy. It positions the Surface higher than where we've been going with. So this is the Lenovo Yoga, which has like its own little built-in kickstand, and it's a Windows 8 tablet using one of the older Intel Atom chipsets, but you can do a lot of what I'm excited about for the Surface. It's perfectly capable of firing up desktop and legacy grade applications. It's a really well-built piece of kit, but this tablet, I can't get the magnetic keyboard back on, but this tablet is going to be, what is that? Almost $150 cheaper than what the Surface is being positioned as. And so that is a fantastic strategy, in my opinion, for Microsoft, because that gives their partners plenty of room to build out devices. Even if someone wants to build a device more premium than the Surface 3, they can. But there's this sort of stigma in Windows land that you need to always undercut, and you can only compete via price. And companies like Acer, so this is the 64 gig Acer Switch 10, and this tablet you can find with the included keyboard dock for around $290. So again, a $200 price difference between what Acer is able to provide at the low end versus what Microsoft's strategy is for moving Windows into something a little more upscale. So it's really interesting in that they're not directly competing with their partners. They're not directly competing with other manufacturers. They're building out sort of a niche for themselves. And it really does seem like they've got their sights set on Apple. So at that $499 price point, you are competing directly against iPad Airs. You know, the iPad Air 2, I think, starts at $499 for a 16 gigabyte version, if I'm not mistaken, which for something that can almost compete with a MacBook Air in terms of productivity and flexibility of design and the ability to run desktop grade software, to be able to take a stab in between the iPad Air 2 and the MacBook Air is a really compelling niche to position a tablet that can also kind of function like a laptop. So I think Microsoft is doing a pretty decent job of moving Windows into a more tablet sphere of influence. They were way behind in getting their mobile strategy out the door, and Windows 10 looks like they're going to be taking it up a notch too. So I'm always going to be a fan of more competition. Let me see if I click into pre-order if I can get more specific pricing on. They've got it. Excellent. So let's see. Oh, this is excellent. Okay, so I'm going to go back into screen share real quick for just a minute. I can't go too much longer because I actually do need to jump out of this video, but let's share this. Okay, so the Surface 3 64 gig is going to be $499. That's with 64 gigabytes of storage, 2 gigabytes of RAM. Of that, I would imagine you probably have something closer to 40 gigabytes of storage available out of the box. We step up to the 128. That's going to sell for $599. So my guess there for doubling the RAM and doubling the storage. No, I don't need help right now, Microsoft. I'm doing this live. It's so embarrassing. Okay, so 64 gigabytes, 2 gigabytes of RAM, Wi-Fi, and 4G LTE is going to be shipping in June 26th, and we don't have pricing for it. Oh, that sucks. I wanted to know how much that was, and ditto. So I'm assuming the 128. So this is going to be the dream model right here, because I friggin' love having LTE built in directly on my Lumia 2520. And so there's going to be some huge overlap here. So if this is going to be $599, I'm going to take a stab and say this is going to be $699 for LTE on the 64. And then we're probably looking at $799. So the highest end Surface 3 is probably going to be stepping right on the toes of the lowest end Surface Pro 3. Man, I'm so frustrated. I really wanted to know what those were going to be all about. But apparently they're going to be shipping later this summer. Ships by June 26th. And so really exciting. We could be looking at Surface 3s coming down the pipe May 5th. Man, that's fantastic. I love seeing more competition. Good deal. All right, so that's the news on the new Surface 3. I'm shocked. I was really expecting Microsoft to be making more noise about this product. I guess this is sort of a fill-in, a little way to kind of keep people invested in the ecosystem, keep people interested before we see proper Windows 10 announcements and probably a refresh to the Surface Pro 3. I'll be curious. Is this something that you guys are looking at for ultra portable? Definitely drop me some comments down below. Do you think we're going to see, based on this, do you think we're going to see a Surface Pro 4? Or are we going to see some refresh, a minor spec bump to the Surface Pro 3 and get like a Surface Pro 3 Plus or something like that? Because I'd also really love to see a Surface Pro 3 come in, just a minor spec bump, maybe a newer processor, maybe a low end with the Core M instead of the Core i3, and then also an option to add on LTE data, just a way to kind of refresh the line so that it still continues to look like the Surface 3. Accessories still support, so you don't have to go out and buy all new accessories for the Surface Pro 3 Plus or Surface Pro 4. And in that way, you don't completely alienate people in the way that you sort of stepped on a few toes when you moved from the Surface Pro 2 to the Surface Pro 3, and a lot of stuff was different. A lot of stuff had changed. So drop me some comments down below. Are you stoked for this? Are you looking forward to Microsoft's rollout for their own hardware, their own products? What do you think this is going to mean for manufacturers that are also competing in the space, like Lenovo, Acer, Asus, Toshiba, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And how do you think this will actually help improve the image of Windows, moving them more upscale so that they're not always competing at the by price, at the lowest possible price? So I definitely love getting into those kinds of conversations. So drop me some comments down below. Thanks for watching. I've got a link down below this video so that you can catch more information on the Surface 3, where you can pre-order it through Microsoft. Thanks so much for watching. As always, I cannot continue producing on this channel if you all aren't sharing my videos on social sites like Twitter and Facebook and Reddit and Google+. So I can't thank you enough for bringing cool people to the party. Hit that thumbs up button, and I will catch you all on the next video.